American literature from 1700 to 1820 has 5 talking points as written by the Norton Anthology of American Literature. Talking point 1: an expanding world and universe. While the early colonial period in America had been characterized by European settlers' theocentric view of the world, that is, a belief in the centrality of God in all things, the 18th century was characterized by a new conviction that the human mind could comprehend and sometimes control the physical universe, and that sympathy and fellow feeling, rather than supernatural grace, was the basis of moral life. Historians often refer this new worldview as the Enlightenment. Influenced by these Enlightenment ideals, colonists by the end of the 18th century established a new and revolutionary political order based on democratic principles. Some of these changes in the American colonies were brought about through the enormous increase in population of settlers from Europe who brought with them diverse perspectives and beliefs. The number of enslaved Africans living in North America also increased during this period. The rapid expansion of transatlantic trade linked America to the Atlantic Rim, a region encompassing Europe, Africa, the Caribbean Basin, North America, and South America. During this period, American energies increasingly focused on commercial growth. Many Native American communities suffered, declined, or even disappeared during this period of increased European settlement in the American Northeast. The diversity of the population led to disagreements and discord, but a sense of American identity and the possibility of independence from England also emerged. Talking point 2: Enlightenment ideals. Many 18th century Enlightenment thinkers attempted to reconcile their philosophical and scientific conventions with the belief in God, though often in a manner that differed significantly from the Puritan traditions that dominated the colonial period in the Northeast. Enlightenment thinkers often asserted that God worked in reasonable, comprehensible ways and had created a rational, benevolent world primarily for the benefit of human beings. The term deist was often applied to people who believed in a rational and benevolent supreme being who could best be understood through examination of the physical world rather than through revealed religion. Adherents to the Enlightenment ideals tended to focus their moral energies on understanding how ordinary individuals might relate to one another rather than on seeking messages from God. They also tended to believe that human nature was good rather than inherently sinful. Talking point 3: Reason and Religion, the Great Awakening. By the 1730s, a conservative reaction against the new scientific and philosophical beliefs had emerged in both England and the American colonies to challenge Enlightenment critics of revealed religion. The religious revivals of the Great Awakening, as this movement is often called, were characterized by an emphasis on human emotion, feeling, and sensation, and called for a visceral rather than an intellectual experience of spirituality. This concern with individual feeling indicates that the Great Awakening was influenced by some of the core principles of the Enlightenment, even as it resisted many of the Enlightenment's religious implications. Ministers like George Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards were associated with the Great Awakening. Talking point 4: Imperial Politics. Political rather than religious concerns dominated the second half of the 18th century in the American colonies. British imposition of new taxes and acts of aggression stirred up resentment against British rule among colonists. colonists' political views, and eventual embrace of the idea of independence were also influenced by an explosion in print publication during this period, most notably newspapers, essays, and pamphlets. Thomas Paine's essay, Common Sense, is often credited with sparking the American Revolution, but it was preceded by a vast array of political texts. The Revolution heralded a cry for a new national literature, independent of Great Britain. Works such as the Federalist Papers, essays in support of the new federal Constitution by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and J. Hector St. John de Crevecoeur's Letters from an American Farmer emerged in the context of this call for an articulation of American identity. The end of the 18th century saw the publication of the nation's first novels, many influenced by the sentimental and Gothic traditions that had emerged in Europe. Early American novels included William Hill Brown's Power of Sympathy, Susanna Rowson's Charlotte Temple, Hannah Webster Foster's The Coquette, and Charles Brockden Brown's Wieland and Edgar Huntley. Talking Point 5, Pursuing Happiness. Although many 18th century American writers emphasized social mobility and equality as the key characteristic distinguishing America from Europe, many people living in America in this period were not in fact free or treated as equal. Slavery persisted throughout this period, and some of the founding fathers, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, were themselves slave owners. During this period, men could not vote unless they owned property. Women could not vote or own property independently of their fathers or husbands. Some women, however, began speaking and writing on public subjects and agitated for educational opportunity and other rights. The condition of Native Americans continued to deteriorate throughout the 19th century as tribes were systematically displaced from their traditional territories and pushed farther and farther west. Inspired by revolutionary and Enlightenment ideals of reason and equality, some thinkers began to question the gap between the revolutionary rhetoric of liberty and the day-to-day plight of oppressed individuals in the early national period. Energy was extended or expended toward beginning to challenge slavery, the subjugation of women, the misuse of prisons, and other social injustices. Benjamin Franklin is often viewed as a representative or even embodiment of Enlightenment principles. The ideals of the Revolutionary period, including the belief that individuals are endowed with natural rights, would inspire later 19th century American writers to examine and critique how Americans used and abused those rights. Thank you.